Welcome to the LDN Radio Show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elsiegood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. Today I'd like to welcome our guest Shelby from the United States. She takes LDN for MCAS. Thank you for joining me, Shelby.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So, could you take me and all our listeners on your journey? When did it start?
So it actually started about 11 years ago for me. I started dealing with what I thought was this mystery illness. I was super sick and I was going from hospital to hospital and doctor to doctor, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. I was actually on my way to Mayo Clinic. And I started out with a disease called chronic active Epstein-Barr virus. And that kind of started a whole host of autoimmune and MCAS and all sorts of things. So I've really been sick for the last 11 years. I've had, periods of time where things have been a little better, but I have never really been what I would call well. And I was actually just diagnosed with MCAS a couple of years ago. I guess it was technically, I was getting treated for it a couple of years ago, but I was technically diagnosed via blood work and stuff February of 22. So, but it's been absolutely crazy to have been diagnosed with multiple chronic illnesses. It's very difficult, and I'm just so grateful that you're taking the time to do this because so few people know about this disease. I've come across so many doctors and emergency room physicians and people who have never heard of it, or they've only read about it in medical books and they have no idea how to treat it or what to do with me if I come in and I'm, in anaphylaxis or I'm in extreme pain or whatever it may be that day or that week. And so I've been lucky to find some really wonderful doctors, a functional medicine doctor and a GI doctor who have been really great at getting me on the right treatment finally. And LDN, has been really, really helpful for me. I feel like just balancing my immune system, like in general with all of my diseases, because I also have Sjogren's. I have basically, there's no name for it, but I have an overactive immune system. So I have like no name autoimmune. And so it's been a journey. And I think that the hardest thing is, when you have any chronic illness or disease, you're facing two battles, the disease itself, and then living in a world where so few people know what you're up against and have no idea what it's like and, how hard it is each and every day. And, I'm starting to learn through meeting people and networking that MCAS is actually not so rare as people were originally thinking that it was. And it's just very underdiagnosed and underrecognized. And so I was really excited when I got this email because, to be a part of the bigger picture and to help spread awareness and understanding about something that is completely misunderstood, I think is just such a great cause.
Wonderful. Now, if we can go back to before you started LDN, before you found your functional medicine doctor, what I'd like to do is have a picture of what you were like at that time. So what was it like for you from when you got up in the morning till you went to bed, a typical day?
So actually I got pulled out of school because at the time I was a junior in high school, which is about the 10th grade. And I couldn't go to school. I was progressively getting worse. Like it started out where it was just kind of bothersome and I was having like everything from random fevers to like nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, like muscle weakness. I was real like short of breath. I went from being a competitive dancer and cheerleader who could pretty much do anything physically to having so weak that I couldn't hold my pencil up and I couldn't, walk from one end of the room to the other. I was just completely out of breath and my muscles couldn't tolerate it. And at one point, at my very worst, I was literally spent 2 weeks in the middle of my parents' bed with a trash can because it was just constant nausea and vomiting. I mean, I was not functioning, they were testing me for everything. I mean, I was having, these bouts of severe pain. I would be out somewhere, I would be at home and I would get really sick and I would start throwing up and I would have this pain in my back. And they were testing me for like porphyria and like all these strange diseases. And at one point, I was hospitalized multiple times because I couldn't keep fluids down and my electrolytes were so unbalanced because I couldn't maintain a regular diet. I couldn't really get my fluid intake in. And so I was hospitalized and you could visibly, like anybody who, even if you didn't know me, you could visibly see that I was sick. I mean, I had lost massive amounts of weight. I could hardly walk across the room. And, for somebody that was as young as I was, it was very obvious, at that point in my journey that something was clearly wrong. And I had multiple doctors that just said, I had one doctor when I was literally hospitalized, approach me and was like, it's really okay if you're making all of this up. Like, you're not going to be in trouble, or whatever. And I like burst into tears. I was so baffled. I'm like, do you guys not see how sick I am? Like, it was just so mind blowing to me. And that was one of the many instances where people thought had anxiety or I was depressed or I was making it up. I mean, I literally went from a normal, healthy teenager to not being able to function, not being able to get out of bed, not being able to eat or drink or like anything. I mean, I was so sick and so nauseous on a regular basis that I couldn't even consume regular meals. And I was afraid. It got to the point where it was so bad. And I was on medicine and Zofran around the clock that, I thought I'm too scared to eat, that was what I would say would be my worst that I've ever been. And finally, I found a rheumatologist who said, I think I'll be able to save you a trip to Mayo Clinic. And I said, oh my gosh, that would be great because I was planned to go the next week. And he did some blood work and he goes, it's just what I thought, chronic active Epstein-Barr. And I'm like, what is that? And it's basically, a chronic, more severe version of mono. It was the worst case he had ever seen in his entire career. And I actually had active Epstein-Barr levels for 4.5 years. And it basically damaged, quite a few of my organs because it's a virus. It was in every blood cell in my body. So it was getting cycled through every organ system. And so, and at that point, we were so far into it, the only treatment at that time for it was antivirals. And we were kind of too late in the game for that. So it was kind of just riding the rest of that out, until I got better. He said I would never get it again. And I've gotten it 5 more times after that, never that severe. And I haven't had it for that long period of time, but it's been reactivated probably 4 or 5 times since then. And so that was kind of the first thing that led me to looking into like different treatment options and different things. And, because I wasn't getting any answers in the medical community, nobody wanted to help me. Nobody even cared. They were like, well, this is just too complicated. You're not a textbook case, and so it was very like a dark place. And that time was a very dark time in my life because I felt Not only was I sick and I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I didn't know if I would ever find treatment or get relief from what all the symptoms I was feeling, but I felt alone. I didn't feel like anybody could really see and feel what I was going through other than, of course, like my mom and people that were close to me, who were going through it alongside me. But
So at that time, if you'd had to have scored your quality of life on a score of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, what would it have been?
probably a 2.
Okay, so it was really tough. That's the
It,
only
wa-
way I can
it
say.
was the hardest thing I've ever went through in my whole life, for
So
sure.
what steps did you take to find the right team of people to be on your side and believe you and help you?
Oh, sorry. I don't know what. There we go. Um, I my mom, I actually credit so much of it to her because the whole time I was going through all of this, she was documenting everything. And she kept a binder every time I went to the hospital, every time I went to an appointment, any symptoms I had, she would jot everything down. And she kept this medical binder that had everything in it. And I actually had heard through a family friend of mine, she was talking about following up with her doctor, and she was saying, and I was asking her about it, and she's like, oh, he's a functional medicine doctor, because I had been looking into like alternative things in the process. I had been researching in one of my groups, actually LDN was one of the things that I came across. And I'm like, if I'm going to get better, like I'm going to have to find somebody who can actually like treat me and who is able to like think outside the box and stuff. So it was when I had called, it was like a 2 year wait. And I waited like 2 years to see this doctor locally to me. And when I was finally able to get in, that was like the first appointment that I've ever had. I've seen hundreds of doctors that I felt like hope for the first time, you know. So
And how long ago was that?
that was about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So
About
what did the doctor say and what was the plan?
So he had said, he was like, you have a lot going on. He said, I can't promise overnight results, but he said, I can promise that we're not going to give up and we're going to work through one piece of your puzzle at a time. And so one of the first things that I did was he had put me on Plaquenil, which is actually used to like treat malaria and some other things. But there had been some research that had talked about how it was really helpful in treating people with chronic Epstein-Barr virus. So I went on that, and then they started me on LDN. I went on some supplements. I completely changed, like revamped my whole diet. I mean, I cut out gluten, I cut out dairy, I cut out added sugars. I did all these like panels testing for mold and mycotoxins, testing for heavy metals, for like all these extra things that nobody have ever tested me for. And I did have mold toxicity, so we started a detox, like trying to detox my body from that. I found that it was actually the mold was in my car, and it was in my air vent because something wasn't working properly. And so it was literally blowing in my face every single day, um, making me sicker than I already was. Um, and they started originally just like trying to regulate my immune system and kind of calm everything down because my body was in such an inflamed state. And I was so like sensitive and allergic to like everything. Like any medicine they would start me on, I would have an allergic reaction to. Um, and looking back, I think I've had MCAS longer than I realized. I think it started in the very early days of the Epstein-Barr virus, like looking back at some of the hospital visits, I would have these episodes where I would feel like my fight or flight would turn on and I would feel like very uncomfortable and my heart would start racing. I would get tachycardic. My pupils would dilate, they would get huge, and I would feel like very sick to my stomach. And this would happen, these episodes would happen like once or twice a month. And looking back, I think that was my body's first like mast cell response to, the Epstein-Barr virus. And so I have a PICC line. I started getting weekly IV treatments. They did ozone therapy. I got started out with ozone saline, and ozone's an oxygen, so it helps like oxygenate your blood. And then I switched about 6 months in. I wasn't really getting as much relief from that, so they switched me to where they would filter my blood with a UV light, fill it with ozone saline, and then I got like a vitamin cocktail called the Myers cocktail. After that, it had like vitamin B, high doses of vitamin C. And then most recently, the newest treatment that I'm getting is the 10-pass machine. I know it's more prevalent like sort of over where you live, like in Germany and other places. But they basically pull your blood out into this hyperbaric chamber. They can fill it with like triple the amount of ozone that they can in a regular IV. And then it comes back into your body. And they do that 10 different times. So it filters almost all the blood in your body, and it oxygenates all your cells. So I started doing that because I started getting like massive amounts of relief from these IVs, to the point where I ended up getting a PICC line, and the PICC line got infected, and I went like 4 or 5 weeks without it while I was waiting for the infection to heal. And I significantly tanked. Like I ended up back taking ER ambulance trips to the hospital because I was like going into anaphylaxis, and I was having severe abdominal pain, and I was having all these mast cell, symptoms. And so I went and got another PICC line, and I've been able to like continue, start the new 10-pass treatment and get back to that. And that's brought me a lot of relief in addition to the LDN and the supplements. And, I was having issues with my thyroid, and my regular endocrinologist put me on thyroid medicine, and come to find out the whole time it was my adrenal glands that weren't working. I had adrenal fatigue from my diseases and all of the stuff that my body has been through. And so they were able to get my adrenal glands fixed, and then my thyroid problem went away. And it was just like all these things that other people were just, your body is not just like, oh, your heart's separate. And like, I don't know about in, where you're at in England, but like here, all of our specialties are separate. We have like a cardiologist and a GI and they're all endocrinologists, and they're all separate, and they all treat these separate parts of the body. But your body works as a system. And if one little thing is off balance, it can trip up another thing. And so it was like when finally I found someone who was willing to look at the whole picture instead of just like, oh, well, the part where you're tachycardic, well, I only deal with heart stuff, so we're just going to address your tachycardia. Well, but that doesn't address the root of the issues. And I feel like LDN is so great at like addressing the root, because I feel like I had immune system dysfunction. And my doctor even, he's the one that told me that. And that really helped like to stabilize everything, like really all of my diseases from a like cellular level, because it was like, even though I'm still sick, and even though I'm still having issues, and I'm trying to sort through this mast cell piece, because the EBV they got that into remission, which is great. I haven't had it in probably 2 years. They were able to get my Sjogren's and my autoimmune kind of calmed down and settled. And that's kind of when the mast cell got really bad. It was like everything else calmed down, and then the mast cell started up. And so they were able to, that all got settled, and then I got something else, and I'm like, oh my gosh, which I probably had it this whole time. But when you have so many things going on in your body at once, it's like, it's hard to figure out where to start.
So I know I was listening that you aren't back to a healthy normal for you. Could you describe a typical day now,
Yeah.
3 years on?
So I would say, nowadays, the hardest part about the way my disease is affecting me right now is my body's very unpredictable. Like some mornings I can wake up and I feel kind of okay and I can get dressed. I have two small children. I have a son that's 7 and a daughter that's 4. And some days I can get up and get them dressed and take them to school, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing okay. I might be able to, like, go grab a coffee, or I might be able to, get some food or stop and get breakfast or whatever. And I'm doing kind of okay, even though I wear out easy. And then other days I wake up and I'm like, oh no, like some days I can't get out of bed. I literally am so reactive to everything. I wake up, I'm just like so fatigued. My muscles are weak. My throat, I can feel like this like swelling in my throat. The littlest things set me off. One of those days I had gone to get some blood work done, and it was crazy because there was a lady behind me and she had some perfume on, and it was immediately like that perfume, like I broke out in hives, everything got red. I literally couldn't breathe. I had to take 2 Benadryl and I ended up in the hospital later that afternoon on IV steroids. Or I eat some food that, like, maybe I'm out and about and somebody accidentally like cooks food on the same grill that they cook the dairy or the gluten or something like that. Or the mold count is really high that day. It's like the littlest things set me off. And so I really don't know. And that's what I would say is the hardest part about it. What I'm dealing with now with the MCAS is I don't know what each day is going to bring. And, I could be kind of okay and I could have a few good hours where I can, maybe do a little something or spend time with my kids or whatever. But then there are some days that I literally am just on the verge of having to go in the ambulance again because I'm so reactive and I feel so bad. And so it's so unpredictable, which is why I haven't been able to work. I've worked in chunks in times past, and it always ends up to where I get a little bit overstressed or something happens or I get sick. And then it's like my body just completely crashes and I get to a point where I can't function. And so it's really hard to, like, for me, like, maintaining employment, because even though I've worked at places where people knew what I was dealing with, I would bring in doctor's notes. Like, they knew what I was going through. They knew where I was going. Every Tuesday I have to get my infusion. It takes about 3 to 4 hours out of my day. It was like, understandably, they have to have somebody that they can rely on. And I just don't know how I am going to feel from day to day and what I'm going to be capable of that day. I mean, some mornings I can wake up and I'm like, oh, okay, I feel okay. And then later that afternoon, like, I had a dental appointment a few weeks ago. I'm in the dentist's office and something in there triggered me. And I mean, I literally got this red rash that started behind my ear, went all down my face, down my neck. I couldn't breathe. I was wheezing. I was coughing. And my mom had to, like, whisk me out of there and, like, give me my Benadryl. And I'm, like, sitting in my car with my EpiPens, just, like, waiting. And so that is what is very hard because it's very up and down still. I overall, I'm not as bad as I was at my worst, but I definitely am not at a place where I feel like I want to be, where I can just, I have some degree of, okay, well, I'm going to be fine. Like, I may be tired or I may feel bad, but I'm going to be fine tomorrow ultimately, and I can do what I need to do. I'm not to that place yet. And so, I'm in the process of trying to get disability, and, that's a draining, exhausting process because I am 27 years old. And so people look at me, and that's the hardest part about what I have now. People look at me and they're like, oh, like, you look great. You look fine. This disease is invisible a lot of the time, and you can't see it on the outside. And you don't know what they're going through unless you're with them every single day. And so to people, I look great. They're like, oh my gosh, you look fine. And I think that's one of the hardest things about it. At this age, people expect you to be healthy and be able to do things and be whole and be, whatever. And I have to I have to manage my energy down to like the second. I'm like, okay, well, I got to do this tomorrow, which means I'm not going to be able to do this, this, and this because that's really going to wear me out. I have to like carefully plan my day to make sure that I have energy to do certain things for small periods of time. Where most people are just like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to go to work and then I'm going to stop at the grocery store and then I'm going to go to dinner with a friend. Like, I could never have a day like that. It would take me like 3 weeks to do all that. And then I would need like a week of recovery.
Mm-hmm. So currently, what medication are you taking?
So right now, I'm still actually on LDN. I'm on a very, very high dose. Normally, like they say, 4 milligrams is all you take. My functional med, he put me on 8 milligrams. And I noticed significant difference increasing that. I take a ton of antihistamines. I take like Allegra and Pepsid because they're H1 and H2 blockers. And I take all sorts of like mast cell stabilizers like cromolyn and ketotifen. I mean, I literally have a medicine bag that I take with me wherever I go. It has, because I take so many medications and so many supplements in a day, that like I have like a paper and I have alarms on my phone. I mean, that alone is like a full-time job trying to remember to take everything. And I take such massive doses of like allergy pills and things, um, and so I'm also still getting the IVs. And then I'm taking at night, I do the Plaquenil and the low dose Naltrexone before bed. Yeah, so one of the things I recently started was something called methylene blue. It's a compound that they actually used to use ages ago to dye like textiles and stuff. And then they used it in surgery and it became like this prescription. Well, now they're called Tro Blue. There's a company, and they literally have a prescriber, like a functional med or somebody has to order it, but they come in these little blue squares and you cut them into fourths, and I take a fourth a day. And it has helped immensely, like with my stomach issues, my fatigue. It brings a lot of relief. Like if I forget a day, I can feel it the next day, like heavily. And it's a neuroprotectant too. Like it protects like your brain, and it also works naturally as an SSRI. So it helps you, like if you have anxiety or you have depression, it helps with that too. I mean, that's not my main like priority. Of course, chronic illness comes with some of that, but it oxygenates your cells and helps reproduce like more oxygenated cells that replicate throughout your body. So it helps on like a cellular level. And that has been really, really helpful for me. And that's the other piece of it. It's like there's not a lot of conventional treatment out there for mast cell, or really, how should I say this? Any chronic illness. And so, but mast cell is one of those newer things where there's not a lot of treatment option. They're like, well, you can take antihistamines and, we have these few stabilizers, but there's no like big ticket. All of those things help. They keep me stable. They keep me out of the hospital. Um, you know, but none of them really get me to a place where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like amazing. I feel so much better,
What would be your advice to people who are following in your footsteps and they're not being believed either?
My advice to them would be to never give up. You are your best and only advocate. And so never give up and keep going and keep fighting and keep going to doctors, because eventually you will find someone that will believe you and will take you seriously. Because it's hard out there, but I really want people to know that there is hope.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much.
I'm Dr. Leonard Weinstock, a guy who's been prescribing LDN since 2005, and I've seen the wonders. And I keep on seeing them, especially in hard to diagnose conditions. They're not that hard to do, but once you know about mast cell activation syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you'll find that 17% of your friends or relatives have one or more of these conditions, and you can help them. We're making a documentary to wake up the medical community, to educate the population, but we need funding. So please fund whatever you can afford, no matter how little. www.mcasfund.com. That's mcasfund.com.
Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, @ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.